Seeing none, they are approved. Comments from the audience are invited to speak one at a time. I also want to remind everyone that the public comment period is not intended for extended dialogue. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the council at this time? Okay, I see no one. Council items to be considered. Council, are there any items to be considered tonight? Okay. Consent agenda. Council, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
I'll
Councilmember
second.
Brox with a second by Councilmember Fulch. Any discussion? Clerk Henderson, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lund,
Yes.
Councilmember Fulch,
Yes, but we can't hear you, Clerk Henderson.
Can't hear you well.
Is this better?
Okay. Yep.
Thank
Okay.
you. Yes.
Councilmember Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Liefeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lund,
Yes.
Councilmember Brox,
Yes.
Fassbender.
Yes. And that motion prevails. Awarding of contracts tonight, agreement for legal services between the City of Hastings and Campbell Knutson Professional Association. For this item, we will have City Administrator Dan Waticha give us an update.
Thank you. And also point out that we've got Henry Skip Schaefer, who would be handling the prosecution work in our meeting this evening. So after introducing the contract, if you have any particular questions or want to maybe a chance to introduce, we've certainly got room for that. This is taking into account several items on tonight's agenda. We closing out on over 58 years with the Fluegel law firm. And over the past couple of months, had some discussions with the mayor as well as with the management staff in terms of how do we proceed. And we looked at a list of a number of firms, met with several of them, and my recommendation is that we split the contract in two and work with two firms. One for the prosecution service, which historically has been about 2/3 of the work that Dan has done for us. And then also a separate contract for the civil side, which is the other third. And it's the piece that you guys are most familiar with. It's having the attorney at our meeting when we have contracts that are reviewed or ordinance that are drafted. All of that falls into that civil area. So it's more the face that the city council is used to, but really there's two functions very important to us. Knutson is really just a powerhouse in terms of prosecution work. They're located in Egan and serve a number of our peer communities in the county. They do actually some training for police departments in terms of what they should know in terms of some of the legal background on their operations. Highly respected. Just every reference check that we made just came back glowing. So in the recommendation to split the contract, it's really we're trying to get the best services we can from two different firms. So recommending Campbell Knutson for the prosecution side, and that's the item on the agenda at the moment. Any questions? I'll certainly stand for those, or can certainly turn it over to Attorney Schaefer to introduce himself or answer any questions directly of the firm.
Great, thank you, Dan. Council, any questions for Mr. Schaefer? Councilmember Fulch.
Your Honor, Dan, I was wondering how much is it that you're annually spending on attorney services, and how does this impact the budget by having two firms on for retainer?
I can't give you the number off the top of my head. Whether we have one or two firms is not going to drastically reduce our expenses. I do expect that 2021 is going to be more expensive than what we've had in the past. I think that's partly a nature of the length of time that we've been with Fluegel law firm, that it just sort of it becomes friendly and easy to, hey, we'll carry it at the same rate or a modest inflationary increase, but haven't kept pace with market rates. I think also that there's probably some savings we've been realizing working with a smaller firm than a larger firm. Just a matter of it has some less overhead. So the hourly rate is going to be higher than what we've been paying. Don't know exactly what that amount will be, but I expect it to probably be $40,000 to $50,000 over the course of the year between the totality of both firms. That's not a matter of working with one or two companies. If we worked with one company replacing Fluegel law firm, we'd probably be looking at a similar increase in cost. So it's not a matter of splitting the contract. It's just a matter of changing firms. There are, particularly on the civil side, I think that there are some room that we would look at for trying to ameliorate those increases. But that's more of an internal operation. Our current, this is getting ahead to the next item, but our current retainer with Fluegel law firm is really large and encompassing a lot of items. So it's easy, and it's been habit for staff, if they've got a question, to call up the attorney. And it's good to get that advice. With Levander, instead of that large scope of service within the retainer, it's going to be much, much tighter. So we'll see more hourly charges. I think that we can adjust some of our operations. One, if it was a relatively simple call that we could have looked on League of Cities website, which has just a lot of background on statutes or requirements, put some of the burden on staff to look on the league website rather than calling the attorney. So there's one place that we can hopefully find some economy. The other would be organizing how we, or who's authorized, or how we make calls to the attorney's office. So it might have been easy for a staff person to call the attorney with a question, and well, now let's run it through a department head in order to sort of vet and make sure that we're more judicious in the calls that we make, and with that, hopefully reducing some of the billable hours. So I'm answering more than what your question was about how does splitting the contract impact the budget. Really, the impact on the budget is changing firms. It's not that we're splitting the contract. That said, although I expect that by the end of the year, we will see a significant increase in costs, we will throughout the year try to mitigate and minimize what those increases are.
I just think that that's interesting that you're asking us to adopt something where we haven't looked at what the budget impacts are going to be necessarily, and you can articulate how that is, or furthermore, how it is that you're going to streamline operations. So I guess I'm a little concerned. what I'll yield.
The budget impacts will depend on the actual number of hours that we wind up calling on. If we call on the same level as we have the past several years, it is in the range of $40,000 to $50,000.
I understand what you're saying. I think that it's, I think it is actually a good thing to allow staff to be able to contact the city attorney's office. Furthermore, I know how important it is to be able to have strong relationships with the city attorney's office and feel comfortable in asking just even the stupid questions, because it's the stupid questions that get you in trouble in the end if you don't ask them because you thought they were stupid and they really weren't. And so, so I guess I wouldn't try to curtail staff contacting and feeling that they can have strong relationships with the city attorney's office for items that they want review of. Even stupid contracts, little ones should be reviewed because God knows they get little provisions that are stuck in them that really staff when they least expect it. And so, so I would be just the opposite. I think that it's important for staff to be able to have those relationships. But and then when I was looking at the civil attorney's packet, it looked like that there was a little bit of an expansion of scope of service where they also provide some legislative policy types of recommendations, which I don't believe that we have utilized with the Fluegel law firm in the past. And so were you actually intending on using that scope of service, or was it just like something that's within their wheelhouse that they provide in general?
I believe that's in their wheelhouse because, to be honest, I don't recall that in there. I trust it is. I don't recall it. It certainly was not anything that came up in either of our interviews or discussions with them. So I think it more is a wheelhouse item.
Okay.
But if we could, I recognize that that because we're looking at splitting the contract, that there's some entanglement between the two. But if a question specific to the civil one, if we could maybe hold those to when we're working on that one. The item before us at the moment is the prosecution.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Any other questions for Dan or Mr. Schaefer? Mr. Schaefer, if you want to speak a little bit, you can. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, council members, and thanks for inviting me, I guess I should start off with. We are very excited at the prospect of being your city attorney prosecutors for your criminal cases, and we're very pleased to have been invited to make a proposal to you. Should we get to a vote, we are definitely excited and ready to walk right in. I'm hoping for a smooth transition with Mr. Fluegel. It's something that we've talked a little bit about timeline-wise, and it sounds like something we'll be able to get started on right away should we get the contract. Be glad to answer any other questions regarding accessibility, that sort of thing. I know that the deputy chief of the police was at the interview and had a lot of questions about accessibility and whatnot, and we're able to answer those questions. We've got 5 full-time prosecutors that are available and working with the police department, and they have decided, I believe, that it would be more of a division head or through their command staff for contacting us as far as to answer some of Councilmember Fulch's questions about costs and whatnot, and how that might be different from the previous city attorney. I don't think it's going to be much different. I think most of the questions and advice seeking that comes from the police department is usually channeled through their command staff. And I think that's how they indicated that it would continue to be with us. There are some fixed costs with respect to dedicated calendars that the city of Hastings will be expected to appear in court on, and arraignment calendars and pretrial calendars, things of that nature, which are fixed. The other kind of unknowns depend on what kind of cases go to trial and whether or not the pandemic is going to create actually more calendars, or if they are going to be able to consolidate them as the new remote court hearings continue. So there are some unknowns. Ultimately, we are certainly open to discussing a retainer. I think our proposal also has a provision where after 6 months, we can come and take a look at it again, take a look at our hours, and ultimately see if a retainer might be something that's more mutually beneficial for everybody. So that's certainly all on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Any questions, council? Forward. And I would accept a motion to approve the agreement for legal services between the City of Hastings and Campbell Knutson Professional Association.
So moved, Your Honor.
Councilmember Vaughn,
Second.
Councilmember Brox. Any additional discussion, council? Person, please call the roll.
Member Vaughn,
Yes.
Councilmember Fulch, Member Fox, Member Liefeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lund,
Yes.
Councilmember Brox,
Yes.
Mayor Fassbender.
Yes, and that motion prevails. Mr. Schaefer, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you very, very much. And we also look forward to working with you guys too. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome. Okay, then the second part would be the City of Hastings Legal Services Agreement with Levander, Gillen, and Miller. For this item, we also will have Dan Waticha, our City Administrator.
Thank you. And Corey Land is unable to introduce herself tonight, but certainly will be the vote is approved. Will certainly be a regular fixture going forward. It is mentioned already, recommending that we split the contract into two, prosecution and civil. When we were interviewing on the civil side, what really stood out with Levander and Attorney Land in particular was that she has the obviously the basic skill and knows the municipal law well, but the other features that really impressed us were twofold. One, her responsiveness. When talking with other cities that she works for, they talked about how quick she is to respond. She's only a text away. If she's in the middle of a meeting and you try to contact her, she'll respond with a text saying, "Hey, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it might be." So just that. So even though we're one of the things that we really have appreciated at the staff level working with Dan Fluegel is his responsiveness. Hearing a similar responsiveness with this other firm really echoed in our minds. The other part that we really appreciated was in the reference checks, we were able to talk with neighboring cities very similar to Hastings. She works for Stillwater, West St. Paul, Cottage Grove. So similar size, metro suburb, outer suburbs, cities that have growth and development issues. So a lot of the areas that are comparable to Hastings and that we rely on the attorney's office to assist with. So when comparing that with other firms that we were talking with, this really stood out head and shoulders above the others, and comfortable recommending that we go forward with Levander for the civil side. But I can certainly stand for any questions. Also note, well, Attorney Shaver was talking, I quick scrolled through the 25 pages of material. So I hope I caught the line that Councilmember Fulch was referring to. If I missed the right line, I apologize. It looked like what that reference is about legislative work is just as a matter of their duties. They're regularly, because of her focus on municipal law, she's regularly monitoring what's going on at the legislative level, tied in with Metro Cities and League of Minnesota Cities in terms of, are there potential legislative changes that would impact us or other municipal clients that, you know, she would pass on information or coaching or, you know, help advise if we might have a change or something needed. I don't believe it's a matter of lobbying on our behalf. It's more just giving us updates on changes in the law. So I hope that answers the question from earlier.
Thank you, Dan. Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is going out for Councilmember Fulch's question. Dan, did we keep Fluegel Law Firm on a retainer for at least a month for the crossover, or has that gone on already? I'm assuming we're going to see some extra cost here while we pass current cases or current projects that are on Dan's desk that are going to get transferred over.
We're, I might ask Dan for guidance on this one. Our proposal is that effective tomorrow, the 17th, Corey Land would be named our city attorney. And that just gives some clarity that if something comes up, is she responding or not responding, and expect that if there's some overlap, it's something that Dan Fluegel would more be advising under Levander's umbrella, so to speak. So the change is immediate, but do expect that some matters that are, you know, in the works or ongoing, there'll be a little bit of overlap. Expect that in the first couple of weeks. Corey will obviously be meeting with staff to hear about particular issues or thoughts at parks or community development. She'll also sit down and have some conversations with Dan in terms of getting up to speed and how we transfer the files. We're going to leave that to the attorneys to figure out how they actually move those, but we'll certainly assist where need be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vaughn. Any additional questions, Council? Okay, seeing none, I would accept a motion to approve the City of Hastings Legal Services Agreement with Levander, Gillen, and Miller.
So moved, Your Honor.
Councilmember Vaughn,
I'll second, Your Honor.
and a second by Councilmember Fox. Any additional discussion? Clerk Henderson, please call the roll.
Councilmember Vaughn,
Yes.
Councilmember Fulch,
Yes.
Councilmember Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Lund,
Yes.
Councilmember Liefeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Brock,
Yes.
Mayor Fassbender.
Yes, and that motion prevails. Tonight, we have a public hearing for a building permit fees. For this item, we will have an introduction by Community Development Director John Hinsman, followed by a public hearing and action by City Council. John, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Tonight before you, you have a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance amendment. This is amending Chapter 34 relating to building department fees. The purpose of this was prompted by recent action from Dakota Electric. They're going to require installation of new load management devices in all homes within its territory. And so with each one of these devices, an inspection needs to occur, and we need to be able to establish a fee to collect for that. In reviewing our building department fees, we also took a look at it holistically for things that may need to be increased, and fees that were not there that should be there. We did find a couple of other items, particularly related to mobile home installation, which we do not feel that we are collecting adequate fees for our services for the installation of a new mobile home, changing that from $100 to $200, and then for window replacements going from $65 to $100. Our electrical fees were not codified within the city codes. We are proposing that they be included within the fees, no changes to those fees. So I can stand for any questions to these, and this is a public hearing, so you can open that at this time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. At this time, we will open the public hearing and I'll scan, see if we have any. At this time, the public hearing is open. If anyone wishes to speak to this, please use the raised hand motion. Seeing none at this time, I will close the public hearing. And council, any discussion? Not seeing any. Councilmember Fulch?
Well, I guess, Your Honor, I was questioning the mobile home installation for $100 to $200. And so that would only be in the case where there's a new home that's going into place, John, or is this something that would also be necessary? You know, I've talked to residents in the past in the mobile home parks, and they've complained about how they've had to endure changes to various attachments onto their mobile homes. I want to say it was electrical meters. And so they just seem to they just get hit with the darndest extra fees. And so I'm just concerned about it being a doubling of a fee for the mobile home park residents. If this is going to be something that's going to be widespread, or is this like a one-time and you're done? It's just when a new mobile home goes into place. So if you could just talk to that a little bit.
Sure, Councilmember Fulch. The increase in fee, the mobile home installation permit, is just for the initial installation of the home. So this is not including any other permits that would be necessary. So this would be a one-time fee for the initial installation. We're basing that upon the number of visits that we normally have for inspections, taking a look that we're usually out there 3 to 4 times during that process to make sure things are installed correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Any other discussion, council? Member Brox.
Mayor, John, I just had a question about your methodology. So when we're adjusting the fees and we look at comparable communities, I assume we do some kind of comparison between our fees in Hastings and surrounding communities. Do we look at the communities that are closest to us, so within closest proximity, or do we look at communities that are of similar size in different parts of the state? Can you just talk maybe a little bit about the process of how these fees were determined?
Sure, Council Member. When we're looking at neighboring communities for fees, I always look at the type of communities that are similar to us from a size standpoint and from a development standpoint. Ideally, looking for a city around 20,000 that has growth and has some historic areas as well. I think those are the most comparable in nature. So we use those to make a determination. So that's one end, but what are our neighbors doing? The other end is taking a look at what we provide for services. And typically when we take a look at making a visit to a site, we generally attribute, about $50 to that cost to make that visit, and then any other fees that we have in staff time and reviewing internally.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Thank you, Councilmember Brox. Any other discussion? Okay, council, I would look for a motion to accept a motion to approve an ordinance of the City of Hastings, Minnesota, amending City Code Section 34.03 fee scheduling.
So moved, Your Honor.
Councilmember Leifeld,
I'll second, Your Honor.
and Councilmember Fox. Any additional discussion? Clerk Henderson, please call the roll.
Councilmember Vaughn,
Yes.
Councilmember Fulch,
Yes.
Councilmember Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Liefeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lund,
Yes.
Councilmember Brock,
Yes.
Mayor Fassbender.
Yes. And that motion prevails. Tonight, council, we have a public hearing to amend the city code for the parklets. For this item, we have an introduction by Community Development Director John Hinsman, followed by a public hearing. This will be brought back for action at a further meeting. So John, you may continue.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I'm going to speak briefly and turn it over to Eric Moss, who will be presenting some background on the parklet proposal. Again, as the mayor had noted, we had originally scheduled this for a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance amendment. During the review of the ordinance, there's some key questions that we'd like to ask and discuss tonight. So we are moving forward with the public hearing, but we are not asking for any action tonight. So with that, I will turn it over to Economic Development Coordinator Eric Moss.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Council. Bear with me a moment. I'm going to share my screen. That can be enabled by participants. Really, again, the goal for tonight is to have a discussion about the framework of the parklet ordinance. One thing staff has been trying to do is reaching out to various vendors to understand how these parklets would kind of come together and trying to identify any potential issues with the ordinance prior to actually bringing it forward for adoption. So in essence, we're trying to give it a dry run before it's actually put into play in the hopes that it's a smoother process for all involved. The concept of parklets is not necessarily a new thing for even the state of Minnesota. A quick Google search revealed a little over a half dozen communities, both in the metro and in greater Minnesota, that currently or at one time allowed for parklets within their communities. Those that might be joining us that maybe are less familiar with the kind of setup last year and kind of what sparked this whole concept of parklets. Originally, the city of Hastings allowed for parklets in response to restrictions placed on businesses as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Here you see an image of 2nd Street, 4 of the parklets that were put into place. This map was provided by Public Works Director, Nick Egger. You see there the dimensions of the parklets from last year, as well as the number of parking stalls that each used up, and the rerouted pedestrian experience, if you will, where the sidewalk was pushed out into the street to allow for the install of the parklets themselves. Looking forward into 2021 and the summer and in the future years, businesses had a positive response to the parklets, both from a standpoint of safety in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the ability to eat and drink outdoors, but also the overall experience of being able to enjoy themselves outdoors when, of course, weather allows. Last year, to provide kind of a baseline, there were 15 spots that were by parklets, 15 parking spots, that is, just along 2nd Street within that first block. So just kind of put a pin in that number. Reference, parking is always a big issue in communities, and Hastings is no different. Another image that Nick Egger was able to produce showing the various parking improvements that the city has made throughout the downtown especially. In total, there's 385 public parking spots, not including street parking in and around the downtown area. Right now, based on feedback we've gotten from area businesses, we estimate that about 18 spots along 2nd Street at this time would be impacted by parklets, at least those that were in the downtown. We understand this is a big issue for the community. And so for that, we, in creating this ordinance, have engaged in some community engagement and talking with individual businesses. I've met one-on-one with a handful. We've also done a survey, got 24 responses. You see there in blue, kind of the summary of what those responses entailed, both the areas for improvement as well as the good that came from them, as well as the Downtown Business Association discussed parklets at least one of their meetings. Costs, certainly always costs money, right? Another thing staff has been trying to ascertain through the ordinance process is what these cost. As Hedrick considers grant opportunities and also recognizing that businesses may be struggling right now and that this would be yet another bill that would need to be paid. Staff has found everything from roughly 10,000 to 40,000 based on contractor and material type. Of course, these are all contractors. There's still the potential, and the ordinance would not require that a business use a contractor. They could DIY it. Now, certainly it would still have to meet building code and ADA and go through the building permit process that is. But certainly there could be additional cost savings even off that 10,000 number to make sure that these are affordable to our business owners. Also in terms of cost, the customization, of course, the more expensive the parklets became. And something that was noted by a number of those contractors was angular. So staff put together a handful of AutoCAD drawings, sent those off with dimensions and angles, and they came back and said, yes, it's possible, but it's very expensive. And so as a result, we looked at, what are some other options for that? I do want to note that it's still the intention of city staff that city would not own, operate, purchase, or otherwise manage the parklets. They would be owned and operated by individual businesses. And our pursuit of cost estimates are simply for staff knowledge for creating the ordinance. Another area we looked at in terms of trying to lessen the cost potentially of these is what could we do in conversation with the city's building official. We talked about the street ability, and in this case, looking at 2nd Street and the crown of that road and the slope that it created. Unfortunately, the crown of that road did not adhere to state accessibility code. And so for that reason, staff, the street surfaces being something that could be used going forward. Also, with respect to sidewalk, the intention at this point is that the sidewalk would remain or would not be impacted, and that it would remain where is as is, and keeping pedestrians out of the traveled portion of the right of way. And here you get to the angular layout. So here you see a drawing that staff put together showing how a parklet would fit, impacting 2 stalls at an angle. That's the drawing that was provided to other designers that we got then that feedback on regarding the customized construction and what that would take. Their recommendation was to square it to the curb. Advantages to that, however, because of the angular parking, when we look at the requirements of being 20 feet off the center line of the road, a foot inside from each parking line, you really don't get much usable space at only 2, and really a 3rd parking stall would be necessary to be impacted to make it really basically worthwhile to have it. And at that 3rd spot, you can get to a dimension of 20 by 16, as shown in the drawing. Seeking feedback from council as it relates to the shape of the parklets, whether or not it follow the angular parking and the impact of 3 versus 2. Again, in reviewing the last year's parklets, and then that 15 number I told you to put a pin in, that was the number of spots taken up last year. If allowed at 3 spots per parklet, it's anticipated that same area would utilize just 12. So even with bumping it from 2 to 3, we still see a net reduction in the number of parking spaces taken up by parklets by 3. So we do see that as a positive because certainly parking spaces was something that got brought up through the community engagement process. So with that, I'll stand for any questions and we can open the public hearing.
Thank you, Eric. At this time, I will open the public hearing. If you would like to speak, please use the raised hand feature. Again, this is now a public hearing. Anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this, please use the raised hand feature. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And at this time, council discussion. Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Eric, for all the work that you've been doing. I've had a few conversations with business owners downtown, and they've definitely have noticed and appreciate all of your efforts, and that you're frequently in the downtown talking to business owners, and that you're following up and asking them pointed questions. And so thank you for doing all of that. I was curious about utilizing the street surface. I read your memo and I just couldn't follow it, where you were saying something to the effect that the street has an incline of like 1.8% of an angle and something about 2% and blah, blah, blah. It made no sense to me. So I know that there was concern, that a few of the business owners had actually expressed their desire to use the street surface rather than having to have a platform. And so I had attended the Downtown Business Association, meeting for this last month of February. And, and a few of them were expressing that concern that they would like to be able to use just the street surface. And then secondly, when we had asked you approximately how much these parklets were going to cost, you had said that just a base parklet would, like a basic one with no bells and whistles, was $1,000. And when I'm reading your memorandum, it looks like it's at a minimum $11,000 for a basic one, and that's a low bid, going up to more like, I think the top end was almost $40,000. And again, I'm not sure, I don't think that was including all of the planters and things of that nature. So that's quite a difference, $11,000 versus $1,000, and so I'm really concerned about that. And I know some of the businesses may be able to have the cash to be able to do this, but there's no guarantee that everyone is, considering the economic situation, going to have $11,000 for a parklet. So can you speak to that a little bit? I'll be quiet for a moment here. Thank you.
Councilmember Fulch, so to your first question and on the 1.8, and I apologize for the confusing nature. I started to dream in parklets, and so I might have gotten too far into the weeds on that. So the Second Street, the road has a crown to it so that when it rains or when there's precipitation of any kind, the water runs to the curb line and then into the storm drain and then into our sewer system. And so that same slope that guides water to the curb line is that same slope that presents an issue from an accessibility standpoint within the Minnesota Building Code and Accessibility Code, according to our building official, Travis Dunn. So that's why the surface at this point is not viewed as a viable option. I understand it was used last year with the parklets, but understanding that was more of a rapid response usage, and we're trying to be a little bit more thoughtful and in creating guidelines for them. So that's why we're not recommending that at this time going forward.
So again, just so that I understand, so over a 9 or 10 foot surface, that there's a 1.8% angle towards the curb line, that makes it not, I guess I'm still not understanding how that's a very minimum. I'm sure that there's houses older than that, old houses around here that don't have flat surfaces, that would, so I guess I'm just lost as to, why it is that a very, very minimal angle to the street surface would preclude us from being able to use the street surface. I'm sorry, call me stupid, but it's like 1.8% angle what? So you're gonna have to do a little bit better than that. I'm just not tracking how that makes it not viable.
Yeah, Councilmember Fulch, fair question. Not being the building official, I guess I won't try and expand upon that any greater. What I can do is, I don't have the answer now, but I can find that answer. And perhaps what I can do, to follow up on that one, is Travis and I and John can put our heads together and provide something to council with a little bit more detail and using Travis's knowledge and expertise with respect to the accessibility code to further answer that question. But I probably won't be able to go any deeper this evening on that.
Okay.
But that's also why we just asked for the public hearing this evening and not adoption. So as questions come up, we can respond to those, adjust it, and then hopefully be ready 1st of March. The other question Councilmember Fulch asked was the cost and why. We're looking at contractor companies that have additional overhead, have costs, have profit margins. There's certainly the ability, and staff has found literature where they've priced out by going to Home Depot, sourcing pallets, that there is such a thing as a $1,000 parklet that business owner could pursue on their own DIY approach to a parklet. Staff would support them in that and help them get through the building code issues to create something that would both function and be safe. That is something they could pursue. So that's where that $1,000 came from. And then in reaching out to specific businesses, those are the numbers they kicked back. Since publishing the packet, as we've continued to reach out to various contractors, we got one in that came in just under 10,000. That included all the, not only the decking, but also the install and the planters on the outside and such. We're slowly chipping away at that. That is something also that Hedra is looking at, again, at helping to reduce some of those costs. And in the end, we're trying to reduce as many barriers as we can, barriers to entry for business owners. We would see this as something that should be usable by as many as possible, but in the end, there will be a cost. And our hope is that as many can take advantage of this as possible. But if it's just not feasible for some, it just might not be. But again, our hope is that the ordinance itself doesn't price people out, and that if they are able to, again, DIY it, they could come up with something that would fit their budgets.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Fulch?
I guess it does. But then to your question about having a right angle versus a slanted angle, I don't know what the angle would be at. So you said that that was much more cost prohibitive not to have right angles on these surfaces. And so you're asking us to give you feedback on that. And so, but you haven't clarified as to, what is the difference? If it's a quote unquote significant difference, I wouldn't be in favor of having those angled parklets. I think it makes sense to have them squared because it would better utilize the space so that they can actually put tables out there and probably most efficiently use that space. Plus, I think it's a bad idea to allow cars to get up too close to those if they were all angled. It just seems to me like you'd be squeezing vehicles in between these patios, and it might be better to allow a little bit more space around them so people aren't nicking or hitting or getting too close and opening a car door or something like that and hitting them. And so I think that it's a good idea. But so anyhow, just back to that question about how much more costly is it so if it was $10,000 for one to be constructed by someone, like I couldn't do a DIY. I mean, heck to the no, I would totally need someone to come in and do that for me. And so let's just say it's $10,000. What would be the increase about?
Councilmember Fulch, the lowest quote I got for an angled one was $30,000.
10,000 versus 30. Holy Hannah. Okay.
And I guess maybe if I could restate the question to council would be, is council comfortable with impacting one more stall per parklet, recognizing that it would still be a net reduction over last year, essentially in favor of allowing for the square parklets to be used as opposed to angular?
I'm personally comfortable with it because, as you had said, you had gone from 18, what had been 18 parking spots to this would be 15. And when I've been engaged in the conversations with the Downtown Business Association, the owners, they're more concerned about traffic being able to flow at all times along the main street, coming and going, rather than the number of parking stalls that will not be able to be utilized. They went on at length about how they heard a lot of feedback when the barriers were up, that people thought that the downtown was under construction and they couldn't kind of figure out how to get down there or things were open. And so it was very clear from the conversations that I was listening to that was their primary concern was just traffic being able to flow freely along 2nd Street.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Councilmember Leifeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. So just a few questions around some of the numbers, but the accessibility issue part due to that slope. So how thoroughly have we looked into the ramp option, like what we did last year when they weren't built up? I mean, I know there's compliance here, ADA compliance, that sort of thing. And obviously we want to make sure we're, you know, taking care of that and making the right choices. But the reality is a 16 by 20 decking over the ground, that's where the money's going to be. There is absolutely no way you can build that structure unless you go dumpster diving for wood for $1,000 just for that structure. And that doesn't include any safety railings, anything decorative on it. You know, I thought I heard someone mention the word pallets, but they've got a 3-inch, 4-inch gap in between them. That's obviously not an option. I can't imagine, even for a DIY individual, which I definitely am one of those, I don't know how you could do this, I mean, just in lumber alone for less than $3,000. And that's if you have the knowledge. So I'd really like to see us look real extensively at what other accessibility options do we have, because then we're also talking about picking it up and moving it, or taking it apart and they're having to move it and find a location for it. That's an awful lot more space. This is obviously Minnesota. We can't leave it there all winter. We're gonna have to pick them up and move them. 16 by 20, that's another job all by itself, is the deconstructing and putting it away. So I guess I would really like us before our next meeting to look at the ADA compliance in regards to the ramps that we had installed last year to correct that. I mean, and then when you're also talking about building it, you also have to have someone, a DIYer, who's going to build in that slant. They have to take that slant out of the road. So now we're not just talking throwing a bunch of lumber down on the ground and screwing it all together. It has to be level with the curb now. So there's an awful lot involved here for what it is I think we're looking to do. And to Councilmember Fulch's comment a bit ago about talking to businesses, I've been hearing the same thing, that they're excited about the foot traffic, that it is bringing people downtown, having those sidewalks open again so people can walk directly past their storefronts. I've heard is a very exciting change. And then I would really just like to spend more time finding out. I saw a word in there earlier in your presentation, Eric, that said it wasn't a requirement. It was I don't know, what was it, a strong recommendation or something? You know, it didn't, I didn't see the law there. So there I go back to our attorneys to say, okay, what is the actual letter of the law on that?
Councilmember Layfield.
Welch? Or Layfield? Eric, did you have anything to add?
No, Mayor, other than I was taking notes, and we'll follow up on that at the next meeting.
City Administrator Dan, you did have your hand up. Did you? No? Okay, and Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor. Eric, are these proposed parklets owned then by the business owner? Is that correct? And I know last year we were hung up with the contiguous connection between the restaurant and there. Is that, I think that's later in our agenda, but would that be, who will own the parklet? And I see the insurance would have to be, so I'm assuming it's a business, but can the public use it just as a general place to use, or is it solely that business gets to use it for their service?
Councilmember Vaughn, the individual businesses would own the parklets. And so being that they would own it, my intention, at least from a staff standpoint, would be that they would then be able to restrict who could be there. Again, they would be required to provide the insurance statements and all of that. And so because they would be liable, I think it would then fall into line where they would be able to restrict, and it would be for private use only.
I think I'll make a comment here, Your Honor, and thank you, Eric, for that. I think last year we did the parklets to assist a problem. The problem was that restaurants were restricted. They couldn't use their place, so we allowed a solution for them with the parklet concept. I think that's great. And I'm more that was a problem that we solved, and I think we still going to have a problem come this summer, and that's why I think we need a solution, a temporary solution to fulfill that. A parklet, this big time, this investment by tax dollars, because it can be a grant, plus businesses are going to expected to bring some funding to come to this. I don't know if I'd be doing any changes to ordinances during pandemics. I think we need to get through the pandemic and then to discuss this, because staff had talked about, customer desire. I haven't heard from a lot of customers, or did the business owners say their customers really enjoyed that? Community engagement, I bring this up at Hedra. We seem to be talking a lot about downtown, but is this a community discussion? And then I asked this at Hedra the other night, is there a look back period? There are some buildings downtown, some businesses and throughout the community that made big investments already. Are they eligible for this grant? For people that already made that investment, do we go back 3 years saying, hey, I used my own money already. I want to pay for that because look at the plaza that I created with that. So I think there's a lot of questions. I'm glad we're not voting on it tonight, because I'm not sure that we should be looking at a long-term parklet decision in the near future. I think we need to get through the problem, which is the pandemic, and helping these businesses get through another summer. How we do that, I don't know that. I don't know if it's extending their space in front of their restaurant, in front of the neighbor's business, but I'll use the word, I don't think it's when we give a private sector the option to say, I get specific use of that space in those public parking spots, that's inequitable to the neighbor next to them. Because the neighbor next to them may say, wait a second, I got a business owner and I got a business I'm going to rent someday. We're going to change an ordinance that would potentially hurt them, saying, well, what about those parking spots over there? Well, you don't get to use them, even though we use tax dollars to help fund them, and it's on public property. It's just that one business. Those are all big questions and big discussions I think we need to have. I think we need to focus on getting through this pandemic and continue this discussion through our committee structure to get to where we need to get to. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Vaughn. Councilmember Lightfeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. Real quick then too, in your notes, if you could, Eric. So the ADA accessibility matter, since we're now opening up the sidewalks, and those businesses that we're referring to on 2nd Street do also have sidewalk seating for ADA purposes, would that then exclude the concern for not the accessibility, but would that maybe preclude the answer to having to raise the entire structure? So, because we are having still our cafe style, our sidewalk cafe, open sidewalk, and then the parklet. And then to Councilmember Vaughn, when we talk about the downtown again, this is the only spot I keep going back to in the city of Hastings where this is a concern. It's the only place where the business doesn't have a parking lot in front of them, who doesn't have private space in front of them, or a parking lot. Even at Midtown Center, they have, it's privately owned property. If they want to close their parking lot to have a gathering of some sort, they have the ability to do that. Downtown, this is the only location where, the city, we're in charge. That's our street. We're the ones that closed it down for how many summers to, bring these excellent, amenities to the downtown area. Well, now we've got to back it up. And however, I do think, to Councilmember Vaughn's point, this does require a look down the road. As far as I see this as a long-term thing, absolutely. Right now, is that a necessity? I'm not sure, because we are talking expenses, and to tell a business, hey, it could cost you anywhere from, $8,000 to $40,000 to do this, but you're going to get more customers, because they're going to have a place to sit. I'm not sure this is the summer to do that. Recovering, they're still saying, hey, wait a minute, we are obviously not at capacity. We're not making what we made 2 summers ago. We're looking to help them, as you said, Councilmember Vaughn, and that's what this is right now. Is it a Band-Aid? Absolutely. Another summer, let's see how it pans out. I say we go back not entirely to what we had last year, but a more of a makeshift, where we've got the sidewalks open. But I think we do have to be having this conversation now so that we can start planning for the future. But the expense to these businesses right now is just, I can't imagine which business down there is doing so well that they can throw the money at this. That's the whole point of all of this, is we're trying to help them bring in business. We're trying to bring customers down there, and gosh, heaven forbid, if it's going to take them, how many months or how many years to recoup that. So I do think this is something we have to do. And when we keep talking about the equity of, parking again, there's not a whole lot of places in the state where you can go and park, where you don't have to walk. And that's a great thing to be in. I think it's a great problem for us to have. I love going downtown and not being able to park on 2nd Street. That just, part of me is like, oh, I gotta walk. But then the other part of me is so awesome. That just means that all of these businesses are thriving, and, and the businesses and the city is doing something right. So let's keep that going.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Liefeld. Councilmember Brox?
Yeah, my question is for Eric is, do we have any business owner who has said, this is definitely something I'm going to do? Because here's my thought. I work in software development, or I've worked with software developers for many, many years. And usually when we're releasing something new, we have a test, run a pilot program. We have a scenario that we work through. It seems like there's a lot of open questions about this concept and whether or not it'll work, whether or not it will be cost effective for the business owner. And there's a lot of information I just feel like I don't have because I'm not running a business downtown. Would it be worth, taking someone who's very interested or has made a commitment, I don't know if anybody has, and saying, kind of start running through the process that we've outlined, or kind of how we see it working, so that we could maybe find out where there's holes in our process or where the problems are going to be, so that we could integrate those into the ordinance, instead of we draft the ordinance, we pass the ordinance, then we set it out there. And if nobody uses it, or it has a lot of problems in it that we didn't think of, we kind of have to work through that as we go. And I know you're doing a lot of that work already. So I certainly don't want to say you haven't. I'm concerned that, you and John and your team is spending a lot of work drafting this ordinance, but I feel like we need like a real life scenario that someone is running through, saying, yes, I want to do it. And I've talked to these people, and kind of do a pilot, if you will, but just to kind of troubleshoot what some of the open questions are, because I think that would help me feel that some of these holes in the process, or kind of what the different concerns people are bringing up, have been run through a test case scenario. That was just an idea I had. Maybe you've already kind of done that, but I agree with Councilmember Vaughn that it feels like a more permanent solution to maybe a temporary problem. I know there's other cities with downtowns that have very well utilized their outside space. And I don't know how many drinks or meals it would take to equal $20,000 to $40,000 or $11,000 to $40,000, or whatever range you want to use. But that's a lot of product to sell, to cover some of that cost. So I just want to make sure that what we're doing and what we're spending time on is something that business owners actually want to utilize. I guess that's my bottom line point.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Brox. Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you. I just want to follow up to Councilor Liefeld at that point about being it's the only place in town. True that it's publicly owned with businesses in that area. Take out the pandemic, I haven't got a lot of phone calls to say we really should put Parklets down here. That's why I think this is a bigger discussion for the future. But there is other businesses in this town that have used some of their parking lot that we as a city required them to have that many parking spots. Due to the pandemic, they took away some of their parking spots to create a parklet concept last year. So I think if it is going to be a downtown thing, now let's focus on downtown. I think we're using the word community and all this other things for funding too. I asked staff then, if we're truly talking about downtown, is it just 2nd Street? I think going forward, as we discuss this, let's be very clear on what we're going to try to do, because we're using public tax dollars for this as grants. Now, if it was a loan, different story, because I think there's an economic benefit to that. for the whole community. I still reference back to these businesses, and some are downtown, that have made their own investment with their own dollars. And I think I can't forget about, I don't think any of us should forget about what they made for an investment, and I got to recognize that. So that's what I'm looking at for the future. I think we just have a problem with the pandemic that we need to get through. I would actually think this is going to come back next fall, next year type thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vaughn. Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it's imperative that we deal with this immediately so that the businesses can begin to plan for the summer and get contractors on board if need be for creating the parklets. And so, you know, here's a little quip, here's a little story. So back in 1968, 69, there was a pandemic that occurred. It was called the Hong Kong flu, believe it or not. I thought my mom was making that up. And I was hospitalized over the winter of 73 to 74 when my mom was pregnant with my sister. And I was there for a week, and my mom said she almost lost my sister. And that was in 73, 74. So it was like 3 or 4 years later after that pandemic had rolled through the country, and that had not nearly the death toll that's happening now. And so I just add that because if you think that this is going away in 6 months, that is insanity. This is here for the long haul. And so we need to be planning for the next 4 to 5 years that as the country begins to go through it. I think that we need to keep our eyes wide open and not just, you know, do wishful thinking and hope that this is just going to blink away. Because, I mean, if you're not paying attention to the news, you should turn it on to listen to all the mutations that are happening and how that they think that they're actually becoming more, not only more contagious, but more deadly. And so I think it's really important that we continue to move ahead with this, that we know that this is going to be in place for the next few years, and that we support the downtown business community at a minimum so that they survive through this, because it's clear to me that there's no way in heck that they're going to be filling their inside of their restaurants this summer or next winter or the summer after that. If you listen to the predictions, they don't think that our economy will begin to even rebound until what is the summer of 2022. So we really need to be forward thinking, and we need to be supportive of our business community rather than just, you know, like I said, doing the wishful thinking thing. And so, so I would feel more comfortable if we had some better options about using the street surface. And I appreciate Eric wanting to look into that a little bit further with the building code official to really understand why is it that we can't use the street surface if this is really, you know, costly. And there are some, if there's a few business owners that maybe, you know, the first year it's an option that they use the street surface, and in the second year they have to build a platform or something to that effect. And ordinances can be changed in the future if we have problems with them. I mean, there's nothing, you know, cast in stone that says this is forever. We could easily evaluate how things went in a year or two and make modifications to it as the needs are there. And so I just really think that it's important that we continue on this. I get very discouraged when we hear when these kinds of conversations come up where we need more time, we need to think about it, we need to analyze it. It's like, oh, for crying out loud, that's why this council doesn't get a whole lot done proactively. I think that we need to focus on what we do know about the science behind this pandemic. And we have heard overwhelmingly from our businesses downtown that they want our support. And we know that the restaurants aren't going to be at 100% capacity for quite some time. So those are the things that we do know. And so I think that we should continue to progress. And I would really like to hear from the businesses. I thought Councilmember Brock's, her comments about hearing from them, I think that was really relevant. I think that the Downtown Business Association provided some feedback to Eric. I'm not exactly sure what that feedback was. It'd be nice to know what their main concerns were. I saw that Amy Fox from Sparrow Brewery was in as one of the attendees. However, she didn't say anything when given the chance, but I think it would be really wonderful, at least at the next meeting, to hear from the leadership of the Downtown Business Association to know what it is that their thoughts are on the matter.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Eric, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So going back just a little bit here in terms of costs, we've talked about that a lot this evening. Currently, as it's been talked about, HEDRA's has the basis for a grant program. They've earmarked $40,000 to help assist with that. That would be a one-time expenditure currently available here in this coming year. As it's currently set up, that could change, but right now that's where that's coming from. Staff takes part in a monthly small business sounding board that includes politicians at the local, state, and federal levels. During the conversation this past week, it was mentioned that in the current relief bill being discussed at the federal level, that currently included in that language is that expenditures such as a park letter for outdoor dining would be eligible for a one-time tax break as a result of, again, ongoing business restrictions. So there's potential for even that cost over and above what perhaps a grant may cover could be tax deductible at the end of the year. Again, it's not approved, it's not signed, so TBD, but that is kind of hanging out there as a potential help to those businesses. Councilmember Brox asked in terms of the number of people kind of looking at this, reach out to Councilmember Vaughn's comment, the downtown businesses, as this is where this is the most practically applicable. There were 6 businesses that reached out saying that they were interested in pursuing this. Only one responded saying that they were not looking to, as they already had some outdoor space that they could utilize. Where is the mostly downtown? And then in terms of hearing from them, staff did send out an email middle of the day today reminding about 40 plus or so downtown businesses, including DBA members, about the discussion this evening. If they wanted to voice any opinions or thoughts to the council directly, they could. Again, they would have that opportunity to do so tonight. In terms of anything that staff has received from DBA leadership, did receive an email from Amy Fox outlining essentially what was provided as a summary to the survey that was completed, and that DBA leadership really didn't have any additional comments beyond what was provided by the DBA as a whole. I think that's all my questions so far, with the exception of the ADA, which we will bring forward at next month's meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. And Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, the comment was made about making sure that we do something sooner than later, not thinking about it. I guess one thing that we do know is that we don't know. If there's anything that we've been able to see is the roller coaster of reality over the past several months, and you know, I think back to March, April, or whatever time frame it was. I can't remember exactly, but we got together and we talked about, you know, what we could possibly do to help out. And you know, there was urgency that was there, but you know, had we not tempered that urgency with you know, looking for what the other funding sources were going to be and so forth, coming from federal and state and otherwise, we would have probably spent the money that was given for the HART grant before the HART grant was a thing, and then that wouldn't have gone out. So we gotta remember that, you know, yeah, I agree with you, Councilmember Fultz. It's frustrating sometimes the pace of government, especially somebody coming from a private business environment in my professional career. But there is some value in you know, having some humility in knowing that we don't know what we don't know, and things are changing. Just a couple of days ago, we were all going to have our vaccines by April, and now it's June. So, you know, that's just the truth. So what I do think makes sense is we should look at this as a phase. 2020 was phase Band-Aid, to quote Councilmember Liefeld, right? That was let's get something done quick and we'll learn from it. 2021, maybe 2021 is phase 2 of that, where it's let's get something done to still address, to Councilmember Vaughn's point, the pandemic, the need that's in front of us. But let's do it a little nicer and a little better, so it looks good and functions well. I don't see why we can't look at this as a phased approach. We fixed the problem immediately. It didn't look very good, but it worked. We're probably going to have some of the same restrictions or hesitancy by maybe people, even if maybe capacity can be at 100% indoors. Maybe that's just not what people are comfortable with. And so that's still the reality that businesses have to operate under. So maybe the outdoor dining and service area is still going to be in need because of the pandemic. But, I'm hopeful that, 2022 probably won't be the same. And maybe it is. And if it is, then we need to roll with the punches. But let's say 2022 is actually a wonderful year and things are completely turned around. Let's all hope. Well, maybe this was still a really good idea, but now it's an investment opportunity for these businesses if they want to make more of a permanent type of investment because they see it as a revenue opportunity long term. And so that's when we enter phase 3 of it. So I don't know if I really said anything different than what's been stated before, but we can still get something done this year that addresses the need, but I think it just needs to be better than last year. So it's kind of the middle ground. I'll hang up and listen.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lund. Councilmember Fox.
As I mentioned in the last meeting, it has been advised that I don't share my opinion about this matter, but I think you all are well aware of my leanings. I just wanted to highlight a couple things. Councilmember Brox, you brought up a great point. Why don't we do a pilot program? I think we kind of did last year and we saw what worked and what didn't, and we are making the changes. Eric is working his tail off to make the changes that didn't work last year work for the future. And I agree with Councilmember Lund and Councilmember Liefeld that this really could be a forward-thinking, long-term planning, visioning thing for the city of Hastings, the tourism side of that we in the past have said is something that the city believes in and something that we will invest in. And perhaps this is something great, just to honor Councilmember Vaughn's concerns, to put on the docket, particularly to our strategic planning meeting. Let's see if tourism and getting people to our downtown corridor is really something that we're passionate about. And if it is, let's keep it in our vision and let's keep it in our conversation. And if it's not, let's readjust that. So no opinions, just my 2 cents. And I also just want to highlight Eric's incredible work through all of this. He's really been so diligent, and we're going to end up with a great plan, whether it's a tiered system, whether it's long-term, whether it's this year. It's going to be phenomenal because Eric is just pouring his heart into it. So thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox and Councilmember Fulch. Any new discussion?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to clarify on a couple comments that Councilmember Lund made. Just to clarify, I didn't say that we shouldn't think about it. I said that we shouldn't sit on it for a long time and skip this year and act like nothing's happening, hoping on a prayer that things just magically go away when you pay attention to the science behind it. We know that this is going to stick around for quite some time. So that's my point of the matter. And secondly, with the HART grants, we did proceed without the CARES Act funding. The federal government took a long time to get around to giving an appropriation. HEDRA had made the allocation for a larger sum. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, if it was like $350,000 or something like that. And that then 180,000 of it ended up getting used through the HART grants. And then we also had made the forgiveness of the on-sale liquor licenses. And then we did end up later on applying CARES Act funding for that. And so there is a precedence here of the city taking action without waiting for the federal government to do its job. So I just wanted to clarify on that. And so as we're moving forward, so that for this next meeting, we'll, as I'm hearing it, it'll be then the third reading, and then there'll be clarification on the matter of the grade and whether or not a platform would be needed or not. I'm just asking Eric for just clarification on what would be coming forward, because we're not taking action tonight, right? We're not taking a vote on anything. This is just for discussion purposes, correct?
Correct.
Thanks.
Eric, did you want to answer that?
Yeah. Councilmember Fulch, that's correct. Staff is not looking for any action this evening. The outstanding item being the ADA accessibility, Minnesota accessibility standards, and how that relates to a platform on the road surface or a road surface. We'll connect with the city's building official and have a report ready for the March 1st City Council meeting.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Any other discussion, council? If not, we will move forward. Good discussion, and really to Eric and John, thank you for all your work that you're doing. Staff has been amazing for the last, we can say, almost a year. So appreciate it. Tonight we have we have a resolution extension of temporary business measures related to COVID-19. For this item, we will have an introduction from Community Development Director John Hinsman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council members. On the subject of COVID relief, we did do an extension, or we did have temporary measures that we established last year by resolution on May 18th. And those items expired on November 1st of last year. What we're proposing to do tonight is to reenact most of them. Some of those were not utilized. Some of those have been modified. I'll go through some of those changes here briefly. One of the actions was the use of sidewalks for commerce. We would still have that going forward. We also had last year a discussion of using planters for table seating that ultimately was never utilized, so that has been removed. We will still use the Bridge Plaza, provide facilities similar to last year. Increase the number of tables along the riverfront. We'll continue to examine where tables are warranted so we can meet the need. Allow conversion of private parking lots into outdoor dining areas. And this is, I think, a key point. So much of the items that we have relate to some of the downtown businesses, but this is an item that was utilized by restaurants outside of the downtown areas, in which there was still a need for private parking lot conversions to meet seating needs for dining. We would still allow that to happen this year with up to 25% of those spaces being utilized. We would also take a more lackadaisical effort towards temporary signage, understanding that during the pandemic, signage for businesses is utmost important. And then the expansion of sidewalk conveys to contiguous areas with the separation of the sidewalk. We eliminated that. We will establish those rules through the new Parklet ordinance. So that's what we have before you tonight, and I could stand for any questions.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor. John, can you just clarify then on that last point there? We were hung up on that last year. Are we proposing that we don't have to be contiguous anymore between the business and whatever the place is?
Council member, what we're moving forward with our Parklet ordinance would be an area that is not directly attached to the building itself, that looking at what other cities have been utilizing over the last couple of years that have a pathway in between there. We believe that that is something that would be worth going forward with, albeit there may be the risk moving forward that someone could look at the contiguous aspect and find this in violation.
And that's my question. What changed? Are we just going to take more risk this year as a community with that option? And if so, was it more on police? Was it on public works? Was it on our city attorney that says last year it was a pretty big hang up? That's why we had to make it kind of inconvenient to walk through there. I'm just curious what changed now all of a sudden that we think it's okay, it's just a risk. I just want to make sure that we are covered as on behalf of the city on the risk side. So
sure.
Thanks.
And council member, it's a very good question. Take a look at how the state had enforced its rules on others that had similar situations that we're proposing, in which there was a physical separation of the sidewalk between the business and the parklet within the street. Finding that there were no, that we could find in any actions taken against those type of entities. We felt that when you took a look at the advantages of having the free sidewalk moving through, which was a complaint we heard numerous times from people utilizing the downtown and business owners, the circuitous nature of moving around the downtown with this contiguous area, that this would be this, in our opinion, would be a risk worth doing.
Thank you, John. Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. To address Councilmember Vaughn's question about the contiguous space, I was worried about that as well. And so I spoke to our Senator Carla Bigham about the impact that that statute had on us, particularly last year. She had been, she frequents our downtown all the time. And so she was fully aware of how awful it looked and the condition it was with the barricades and all of that. And so she's actually introducing a bill in the Senate and then in the House. Shelley Christensen, who is the House rep out of Stillwater, who, Hastings and Stillwater have been, we've been the progressive Rivertown communities here in Minnesota that have been forward thinking. And so they together are going to be introducing a bill to change the statute so that this won't be a problem for us into the future. So more to come on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Any additional discussion? Okay, at this time, then I would accept a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Hastings approving temporary measures for operation of commerce.
So moved, Your Honor.
Councilmember Leifeld and Councilmember Brox with a second. Additional discussion, Council? Councilmember Vaughn.
Yep, I just want to verify that. Are we leaving number 7 in there? Staff's opinion is they're willing to take the risk, and the same with our attorney. I mean, we're signing off on a potential here that contiguous might be without a barrier. They can walk across that. I just want to make sure that we're covering ourselves here.
And Councilmember, I can respond to that. The resolution before you does not include any mention of the contiguous nature of parklets. We would have that within the parklet ordinance itself.
Okay, thank you, John.
Any other discussion, Council? Okay. Clerk Henderson, please call the roll.
Councilmember Vaughn,
Yes.
Councilmember Fulch,
Yes.
Councilmember Fox,
Abstain.
Councilmember Leifeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lund,
Yes.
Councilmember Brox,
Yes.
Mayor Fassbender.
Yes. And that prevails. So tonight we have kind of a bittersweet night again. And as you know, tonight is Attorney Dan Fluegel's last evening with us. The city has been benefiting from the guidance of Fluegel Law Firm for, well, what we know is 58 years, which is a very long time, as you know. As I look at the screen, I'd mentioned this to Dan Waticha today. None of you on the screen were even born at that time. Isn't that amazing? I mean, if you really seriously look at that, Dan, that is amazing. And we are so grateful, from you to Sean Moynihan to Don Fluegel to Sam Hertogs. Did I miss someone? I can't remember. I mean, that's amazing. So you're so appreciated. So with that, I hope you can see it, but the city is giving you a beautiful photo of our city hall, and it's etched in glass to the Fluegel Law Firm, a recognition of 58 years of definitely faithfully representing the city of Hastings. 1963 to 2021. So that's amazing. Your face is going to be missed. And again, we'll see you around the town. I'm hoping, and we will see your smiley face. So we appreciate all that you've done in your firm, and we wish you the best in everything that you choose to do. I think I have a few people that would like to speak. Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Dan, thank you. I appreciate years of service and friendship that we had here. I think you're reading those dates, Mayor, it really shows. I mean, it's unique to have a community that has longtime attorneys that live and be our neighbors. Dan, just thank your colleagues, thank your dad for being here for us this long, and please give us your input. Don't charge us when you send me a bill. But as a resident, please stay in touch with us, and I look forward to representing you still. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vaughn. We'll get that to you so you can properly hang it in your office.
We'll definitely display it proudly in the office, and I can't say enough how much I do appreciate the trust and support you've given to me and to our firm over the years. To not only this council and the current staff, but also to the past city councils and staff that we've worked with over the years. We very much appreciate it. It's great to be part of this team and part of this great city. I've grown up here. It makes a big difference to me that the city proceeds, and through all these different times that we've experienced, things have really changed. I think I wasn't around in 1963, but I do know that there's been a lot of change. I do know that you'll be in good hands with the two new firms that were appointed tonight. I think you're going to benefit from some of that depth of knowledge and experience with both the Levander firm and the Campbell Knutson firm and the primary attorneys. So, but I can't say enough how much I appreciate the trust that you've given us, and I'll miss this a lot. And I just thank all of you for the trust you put into me and in our firm and letting us serve this great community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, do you have any announcements? I do have a few. Saturday, February 27th, we have an introduction to ice fishing at Lake Rebecca. Bait, tackle, poles, and holes are provided. All attendees can fish without a fishing license during this event. Catch and release only under the DNR waiver. This event is in partnership with Carpenter Nature Center, National Park Service, and Department of Natural Resources. Free of charge, but a registration is required. If you missed the State of the City presentation last week, the video has been posted on the city website as well as HCTV YouTube channel. Next week, the United Way of Hastings is hosting a series of 5 free webinars. How can we help our children succeed through COVID-19 and other mental health challenges? To learn more and register, please visit the United Way of Hastings website. We can't forget, we have a birthday this week. Councilmember Leifeld has a birthday on Thursday, I believe. Along with that, there are some meetings coming up. Tuesday, February 16th. 6 p.m. we have a finance committee. Wednesday, February 17th, we have a public safety advisory commission meeting at 6:30. Monday, February 22nd, we have a planning commission meeting at 7 p.m. And Monday, March 1st, we will be in session for council again at 7 p.m. With that, I would stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councilmember Brox.
Second, Your Honor.
And Councilmember Leifeld. No additional discussion. Clerk Henderson, please call the roll.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Yes.
Councilmember Fulch.
Yes.
Councilmember Fox.
Yes.
Councilmember Liefeld.
Yes.
Councilmember Lund.
Yes.
Councilmember Brox.
Yes.
Mayor Fassbender.
Yes. And that motion prevails. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good week.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.